So welcome to my segment of chemistry videos, and we are focusing on the topic called nonmetals. But under nonmetals, we want to talk about carbonates, oxide, and also hydroxide. So the first one that we are going to start with is we are going to talk about carbonates, specifically calcium carbonate. So in an exam, you need to know the chemical formula for calcium carbonate. So the chemical formula for calcium carbonate is simply CaCO3. So that is calcium carbonate. Then they are going to ask you, what is the common name? What is the common name given to calcium carbonate? So calcium carbonate is sometimes called, is what we call as being limestone. So when you hear the word limestone, then we are talking about calcium carbonate. Or you can hear of the word marble. So sometimes we say marble chips. So when you hear of the word marble chips, limestone, then they are referring to calcium carbonate. Now, what exactly do you need to know about calcium carbonate? Well, for one thing, we have to realize that calcium carbonate is a white solid which is insoluble in water. So I can simply say that calcium carbonate is a white solid and it does not dissolve in water and is insoluble in water. So that is what you need to remember. So it is a white solid, but it also does not dissolve in water. Now, when calcium carbonate is strongly heated, it decomposes to form calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Yeah, so that is what we call as being thermal decomposition. Yeah, so we can say when strongly heated, calcium carbonate, so when strongly heated, calcium carbonate decomposes. So it actually decomposes into calcium oxide. Let me just use the chemical symbol, and also carbon dioxide. So that is what is going to happen. So if you have got calcium carbonate, which is in solid form, and it is subjected to heat, what is going to happen when it is subjected to heat is that this calcium carbonate that we have is going to break down into calcium oxide, which is in solid form, and also carbon dioxide, which is a gas. So the whole equation is actually balanced. So this is what we call as being thermal. So the whole process is simply called as being thermal decomposition. So when they ask you what is the name given to such a process, so we can call it as being thermal decomposition, because you're using heat to break down the calcium carbonate into calcium oxide as well as carbon dioxide. Now remember, when it comes to this calcium oxide, the calcium oxide that is obtained here is also given a common name. Sometimes this is given a common name as being quicklime. So if you have heard of quicklime, then we are simply talking about calcium carbonate. Now sometimes they can tell you to what is the identity test of carbon dioxide. So I can just give you what we are calling as being the identity. So how can you identify that the gas produced or liberated is carbon dioxide? So we can talk about the identity test for carbon dioxide. So when carbon dioxide is bubbled through lime water, it turns the lime water milky. So we can simply say when carbon dioxide is bubbled, so when it is bubbled through lime water, so when bubbled through lime water, it turns the lime water milky. Sometimes some books, instead of saying milky, they are going to be saying cloudy. That's what we mean. But of course, you need to be careful. you don't need to continue bubbling the carbon dioxide for a long period of time. You only need to do it for a short period of time so that you can have this milky solution that is going to be produced. Okay, so that is what you need to know. Apart from that, it is always important to know what are the uses of calcium carbonate. So let's talk about uses of calcium carbonate. What are the uses of calcium carbonate? Well, there are so many uses of calcium carbonate. For example, we can say it is used in making or manufacturing of cement. So cement is actually manufactured using calcium carbonate. 2, you need to remember that it is the calcium carbonate. It can also be used for making glass. So we can say it is used for making glass. So most of the glass caps, the glass windows that you are able to see, part of the component that they are going to be using is calcium carbonate. It forms a component for making up glass. Another one, it is used to remove impurities. It is used to remove impurities during extraction, to remove impurities during extraction of iron. So it is also going to be used to remove impurities during the extraction of iron. For example, you are going to find that what we commonly call as being sand, silicon dioxide, which is commonly called sand, which is the impurity that is there, it is going to be reacted with calcium oxide. So when calcium carbonate decomposes, it produces calcium oxide. So that calcium oxide will react with the silicon dioxide, which in this case is the impurity. And when these two react, you're going to find that calcium silicate is going to be produced. And this is what we simply call as being sludge. So sludge called calcium silicate is going to be produced. Now remember, the whole reaction will take place. Calcium oxide is an oxide of a metal, and therefore we call it as being a basic oxide. And silicon dioxide is an oxide of a non-metal, therefore it is called an acidic oxide. So an acidic oxide will react with a basic oxide to form up what we are calling as being sludge, which we sometimes call the chemical name as being calcium silicate. So those are uses of the calcium oxide. Let's move on to another carbonate. In this case, we are talking about oxide, but I'm going to specifically talk about, calcium oxide. So calcium oxide. What is the chemical formula for calcium oxide? In our previous formula, we actually did highlight that. So calcium oxide, that's the chemical name. But what is the common name that is given to calcium oxide? So the common name that is given to calcium oxide, which you need to remember, like I said, this is what we call as being quick lime. So calcium oxide is simply called as being quick lime. Now, one thing that you need to remember about calcium oxide is that calcium oxide reacts vigorously with water. Now, when calcium oxide reacts with water, it produces calcium hydroxide. At the same time, a lot of heat energy is liberated. So I can say that calcium oxide, allow me to use the chemical formula, calcium oxide, reacts vigorously with water to form calcium hydroxide and release a lot of energy. So that is what we mean. So it's like a reaction because it releases a lot of energy, so we can simply say it's an exothermic reaction. So what do I mean? For example, when calcium oxide, which is in solid form, reacts with H2O, which is in liquid form, that is your water, what is going to be produced is calcium hydroxide, which is in aqueous form. Apart from that, you are going to find that a lot of heat energy is actually produced in this reaction. So that is the overall reaction that will take place. So remember the chemical formula, remember the common name for calcium oxide, quicklime. And when calcium oxide reacts with water, the reaction is so vigorous that it produces, calcium hydroxide. At the same time, you're going to find that heat energy is going to be liberated. Let's conclude with our last, hydroxide that we want to talk about, which in this case is calcium hydroxide. What exactly do you need to know about calcium hydroxide? So the last one, I'll call it C, is calcium hydroxide. Calcium hydroxide. All right. So what is the chemical formula for calcium hydroxide? For calcium hydroxide, the chemical formula for calcium hydroxide, like the previous equation you saw, this is calcium hydroxide. And the common name that is given to calcium hydroxide, because they will be asking you in some examination question, the common name that is given to calcium hydroxide, this is what we call as being lime water. So when you hear of lime water, and sometimes instead of being called lime water, it is also called as being, slacked lime. So this is what we can call. So when you hear of slacked lime or you hear of lime water, then they are simply talking about calcium hydroxide. So that is what you need to remember about calcium hydroxide. Okay, so the common name, or if you want, you can refer to it as being a special name. Now, an important aspect that you need to remember about calcium hydroxide is that calcium hydroxide is the one that turns milky or cloudy when carbon dioxide is passed through it. Why? Because a white precipitate or suspension called calcium carbonate is formed. So I can say that calcium hydroxide, so calcium hydroxide turns milky or cloudy when carbon dioxide is passed through it, and a white precipitate. So a white precipitate, or you are going to find that you can call it as being a suspension, a white suspension of calcium carbonate. A white suspension of calcium carbonate is formed. So you are going to find that when this calcium hydroxide is bubbled, this calcium hydroxide, you bubble carbon dioxide through the calcium hydroxide, it turns white or cloudy. Why? Because of a white precipitate that is actually formed, and that white precipitate that is formed is what we call as being calcium carbonate. So I can show you how the reaction takes place. So calcium hydroxide, so when this calcium hydroxide, which is in aqueous, reacts with carbon dioxide, which is a gas, so you pass it through that, what is going to happen is that you are going to have calcium carbonate, which is in solid form, and that is makes the solution turn milky or cloudy because of that. At the same time, you find that water is also going to be produced. Like I said in my preamble, you only need to pass the carbon dioxide in this lime water for just a few seconds or minutes. The moment you see the cloud, you don't need to continue bubbling the carbon dioxide, because another reaction will take place that will make the milky or the cloudy solution to disappear. What do I mean? Well, I mean when excess carbon dioxide is passed through for some time, the precipitate. So we can say the precipitate disappears. So you're going to find that the precipitate is going to disappear. Now, why does it disappear? It disappears because calcium hydrogen carbonate is formed. So it disappears, and a clear solution. And a clear solution of calcium hydrogen carbonate is formed. So when you continue to bubble carbon dioxide, what is going to happen is that the precipitate will now disappear, and that will form a clear solution of calcium hydrogen carbonate. So what I mean, you can get this reaction that you have this side, calcium carbonate in solid form reacting plus the H2O. Since you have continued to bubble more carbon dioxide, it simply means plus carbon dioxide. When that happens, what are you going to have? You are going to have calcium hydrogen carbonate. So this is what is going to be formed, and this is going to be in aqueous solution. So this is the clear solution that you are going to have, because when you continue to bubble more carbon dioxide, that precipitate which was formed will disappear because a new compound is going to be produced. Therefore, let's talk about the uses of calcium oxide and also calcium hydroxide in everyday life. So let's talk about the uses, because they are going to be asking you in the exam. So what are the common uses? So let me say uses of calcium oxide and calcium hydroxide. So what are some common uses of calcium oxide and calcium hydroxide? Maybe let me start with calcium oxide. Some of the uses, I'll be using the chemical formula. Calcium oxide, is used, we can simply say it is used, calcium oxide is used as a drying. So we can use it as a drying agent for ammonia. So it is used as a drying agent. So we can use it as a drying agent for ammonia. So if you want to dry the gas called ammonia gas, it simply means that calcium oxide is the best drying agent that you can use. We can also say that calcium oxide is used, to remove impurities in the extraction of iron. So it is the calcium oxide, remember, like I explained, that is going to react with the sand, the impurities, the silicon dioxide, to produce sludge. So that is what is going to happen. Apart from that, calcium oxide is used as lining. So you can also use it as lining in the blast furnace. The reason why you want to do that is because that calcium oxide has got a high melting melting point. So you can help to increase the temperature inside the blast furnace. So calcium oxide is going to be used for such purpose. Then calcium hydroxide, on the other hand, when we talk about calcium hydroxide, on the other hand, this one, when you have got a broken limb, maybe your bones have actually been broken, there's that plaster that they put up. That is what we call the plaster of Paris for for your broken arm. So calcium hydroxide is used as plasters. So we call those as being plasters of Paris for broken arms and legs. So they can actually use it to attach it so that you are able to retain or to heal during that period. Apart from that, you should remember that calcium oxide and calcium hydroxide, they are also used for treating acidic sores in farms. So we can say that they are used for treating treating acidic soils in farms. So that is what they are going to do. When the soil become too much acidic, they'll apply lime, and that is going to help to raise the pH, thereby neutralizing the pH. Apart from that, we can also say that they are used for neutralizing. So they are used for neutralizing, acidic industrial waste. So there are some industrial waste. For example, in Zambia, before nitrogen chemicals of Zambia can release some of their chemicals, they need to make sure that they neutralize it before they can release the water back into the Kafue, river. So they are going to use things like calcium oxide or calcium hydroxide to neutralize the acidity in those, effluents that you have. Sometimes even, sewage can also, in case there's an overspill of the sewage, you can neutralize the stench that comes from there by using calcium oxide and also calcium hydroxide. Please watch out for my next video as we look at some sample questions on how you can go about, to answer questions on carbonates, oxide, and hydroxide. Please, you can like, subscribe, so that you can receive a new update in case I release a new video. Thank you so much.